God morgen and happy Wotan's Day to you. I hope that this week is going wonderfully for you, and I hope that you are getting all the energy and the experiences that you need. Today we'll talk more about these experiences. As we know, it is these experiences that provide for us the ability to build wisdom. Before we get started today, I want to say firstly, foremost, thank you so much for all of you who have liked, followed, and subscribed us on the multiple platforms that we have, to include New Reality TV at newrealitytv.com. For without them, all of you, we would just not be able to get this message out to all of those who really need to hear it. For those of you who want the audio version, by all means, please like, follow, and subscribe us on the multitude of audio platforms, Apple and all the like. So check those out as well. For those of you who need to hear more about me, my message, about the shows, whether they be the pre-recorded or the live shows, check out my website at norsewhispers.com. There you can also find an ear that you can bend, someone who can listen and understand and maybe help you to find kind of a path forward, if you will. So check those out, norsewhispers.com/coaching, and there hopefully we can get dialogue started that can help you find that piece of intellect that you're really looking for. This morning, we'll also have the Facebook live chat available for those of you who'd like to post and let us know your thoughts. And of course, as always, ask questions and we can answer them as we go. Finally, before we get started, I want to say, for those of you who might have some extra coins jingling in the pocket, by all means, drop those in the tip jar. Every little bit goes to helping us produce a message that gets out even further to those who may need it. So thank you as always. Today we're talking about Wotan, and we're talking about his quest for wisdom. And we're also identifying what actually is wisdom. Well, wisdom, of course, for those of you who may have missed our previous episodes, wisdom is simply the application of experience to knowledge. Now, experience comes in a multitude of flavors. experiences that we may have are those physical sensory inputs that we may receive, whether those be visual, audio, smell, taste, or touch. All of these produce a kind of a snapshot in time. So a very micro sliver of screenshot, if you will, of that which is around us that we can absorb through our physical sensory input. But there's more to each experience than just that. Experiences also include the emotional states. Now, many of us have said, "Oh, we're macho men and or beat chest. We don't have emotions. We never show emotion. We don't deal with emotion." Yes, you do. All right. You may try to quash it, but it affects you nonetheless the same identical way as those who are more open to an emotional state change. Okay. You're denying yourself, maybe, but you're not denying this emotional effect on what you see every minute of every day. We've talked about the thought process and where we have experiences that are going to come into our mind. They're going to process through an emotional filter. They're going to drop down. They're going to release hormones into our bloodstream. Those hormones are going to rush back to our brain. Our brain's going to do some comparison. It's going to look at what the composition is of this chemistry, and it's going to look at its little recipe book and say, this is what I should be feeling. It's going to attach that recipe book header to this experience that we've just gained, right? So we're going to push that into memory. We're going to alter a few things within our thought process and certainly the aura that represent this emotional change, whether we consciously acknowledge it or not. Okay, so my grandfathers have always described the thought processes when we bring in, and this is a visual which I love, but when we bring in an experience into our life, into our processing, it's going to go through this thing called the well of the self. Now, my grandfathers look at this as kind of this well, very much like you would have a well of water. Okay, so half filled with water, and down at the bottom is a collection of beautiful rocks. These rocks, of course, are our intrinsic values, our virtues, those things that make us the way we are. They are our decision matrix, if you will. So they're at the bottom of this well. And of course, when the water within that well, our general thinking, is open and clear and available, this energy beam that we're bringing in, called sensory input, is going to go through this water, and it's going to go through the rocks at the bottom of this well and to a recipient point just beyond that kind of reflects our values on the experience that we've just absorbed, right? So now we have our experience, whatever we just saw, tasted, touched, smelled, right? Going to come in, going to go down through this value rocks to a coagulation point where we know physiologically that it's going to then release chemistry, the hormones and all of the things that make us what we are. It's going to release that into the bloodstream. Bloodstream is going to come up to the brain. Brain's going to do the comparison, so on and so forth. So what we see is in this well is we have this layer of water that takes up most of the well. And that water's clarity is decided upon the previous experience's emotional state that registered. So, in other words, if one moment we see something that's very horrific, that's going to set our brain or our thinking in such a way that the following experience, the following present, is going to come in and process now through that energy, right? So it's kind of one behind. But mind you, these are micro slivers of time. So this is not like we have to kind of wait for things to catch up. No. This is happening almost instantaneously through our brain. And this water, the clarity, is based on what we're thinking, how much, how full our thought process is. So if we're super just spun around the axle with whatever it may be, right, an emotional state, something that's very, very problematic in our lives, very traumatic maybe, and that's coming into our brain, and that is going to now set the clarity of this water. Now, many decide through a multitude of other processes that instead of waiting for this energy that we've just received to go all the way through the water, out the bottom, and into a coagulation point that kind of generates this beautiful image of whatever experience it was, plus our values, right, and processed, it's going to reflect off the surface of the water. Ding. Okay? So it reflects off the top of the water. In other words, we're not pulling our values, our virtues, our what makes us what we are. We're not pulling that into this experience. We're just avoiding that altogether. We're bouncing off the surface. We're going to another coagulation point. We're releasing different chemistry. And the key there is that we are going to release within our bodies different chemistry. This chemistry is going to have a hindering effect on the next phase of our thought process. The next phase following this well of the self, as this chemistry is released, our thought process is going to go through what the tunnel of thought is, what my grandfathers call it. And the tunnel of thought, of course, is this thing that we've described many times, just a pipe, if you will, in our thought process of throughput. And it has two real magnetic effects, right, that are going to occur as we process our emotional states through this tunnel of thought. This tunnel is going to, firstly and foremost, we're going to have, and we've spoken about this before, a layer of silt along the bottom. That silt is when we have taken a shortcut and we have bounced off the surface of the well of the self. That delta that exists between where we arrived and where we should be, right? Because instead of bouncing off the surface, we've gone all the way down to the bottom of the well and out through an experience. That delta now becomes an intrinsic stressor. The intrinsic stressor then provides this silt within the tunnel of thought that reduces the amount of emotional processing space we have available to us. Remember, we're always going to try to keep, by nature, we're going to try to keep a little piece at the top called the headspace of thought. This is where we can actually apply cognitive thought to this trauma that's occurring in our life, and we can kind of break it down into more manageable chunks. But if this trauma now is being pushed higher and higher and higher because of this silt, we have less and less cognitive space that we can now use to break this thing down, right? So what we find is this trauma now becomes overwhelming. We can't think our way through it. It just kind of mentally paralyzes us as we are experiencing the effect of whatever it was. So that becomes very problematic when we talk about our lives. Now, this is also part of the experience of life that is going to set the mode, set those emotional filters that will then translate or interpret the next energy or the next experience, the next present experience. So each experience is being processed individually, and we have this emotional state that's kind of floating, being created and floating around in the background, maintaining the emotional filters that then processes the next experience, right? So our emotions continue, because remember, the brain is trying to maintain a path. So if, say, for those of us who experience maybe a sense of depression, and we kind of have that mindset, so our mind is already there. It's set the emotional filters. The things that we see now going forward, experiences that we have moving forward in our lives, are going to simply try to support that state of mind. Okay, so what's happening is we see the same thing everyone else sees. However, because of the emotional filters being set, we're going to interpret it the way our brain wants to stay thinking, right? So it kind of wants to stay at kind of this even keel, no changes, and stop bouncing all over the place. We just want to even Steven, right? That's what the brain wants to do. And even in a bad state, even in a depressive state, the brain wants to remain that way. It doesn't want to change, right? So everything we experience after that is going to kind of promote that, right? So we're going to look past the things that would bring us joy and happiness. We're going to look past them because our interpretation is to find things that match what's in our brain, right? So think of our that emotional state as really as kind of somewhat blinders, right? So we're going to kind of block away those things that would force us to change our mindset, our emotional state, right? So we're going to overlook those things, and this is really a training of the brain. Now we know the same way that we train our brain to do everything else that it does, we can train our brain to, instead of keeping these blinders up, we're going to take those down. We're going to look at an experience of reality, and instead of finding those things that would continue the process of depression, we're going to change. We're going to use this thing that's deep in the mind that I call the me gate, and we're going to say, no, you know what, all the interpretation here and the emotion and all that stuff says I should be sad, but you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change. I'm going to be happy. I want to be happy, and I can set this at the me gate. Now, what the me gate allows me to do is set the energy of an experience to then be stored in memory, but in addition, it's going to go back and remember, I was saying before, where we're going to set the clarity of the well, right? In the beginning of our thought process, we're going to set the clarity now differently. We're going to alter our emotional filters that then will allow us to see these things that bring us joy, harmony, peace, love, contentment rather. All of these things are part of the human mind's natural state. The human mind wants to be loved. It wants to be harmonious with those around it. It wants to feel comfortable, and it wants to be fulfilled or content. That is our natural state. Okay? Hence, we have this amazing generator of energy within our spiritual mind, which simply generates an enormous amount of energy that we can use to our advantage, called hope. Hope is this energy source within the spiritual mind that kind of filters into the physical mind, allowing us then to change the narrative inside our brain and set these emotional filters, altering then our interpretation of reality. Okay? We all see the same things. right? If we were all standing in a field and we were looking over the field and we were observing whatever is there, we would all see the same picture, right? But half of the people there are going to look at that scene and go, all right, that's great, right? And half of them are going to recognize the beauty that is contained in that experience. Looking over the scenery, maybe seeing a sunrise or sunset, whatever it is, we're all looking for that stuff. And we're going to see the beauty. It's the same image. We're all looking at the same scene. Yet, some people will reflect upon its beauty and others will not. This is the emotional filter at work in our everyday lives. As another example would be when we get up in the morning and we're getting ready to go to work, as an example. We wake up, we're groggy. We woke up on the wrong side of the bed, stepped on a Lego as soon as we stepped out of bed, and it's just set our mood for the day, right? Well, what it's done now is set our emotional filters. So now, everything we see, everything we experience, will support that mindset. So as we go to work, people come and kind of driving erratically or in our way or cutting us off or easily buildable to this place called road rage, I think they call it. Everything's going to support that direction. Why? Because we have set our mind to see those things. The same drive, however, had we not stepped on the Lego, had we not woke up on the wrong side of the bed, and we woke up refreshed, recharged, ready to go, and it's a beautiful day outside, and our commute to work is just amazing. We see some flowers starting to bloom on the curbs or on the side next to the sidewalks. All of these things, we see the beauty of the world. Why? Not because the scenery has changed, not because of any other thing other than the fact that you are interpreting that scene differently. Nothing else has changed. The same events happen, the same people interact with us on our way, everything identically the same, but you are seeing it through a different lens. You have altered your perspective. And we all have this ability. This is not something that's a superpower where you have to wear a tight suit with underwear outside. That's not what this is. This is an everyday, every living form has this potential of seeing the world differently. I'm always confirmed as I deal every morning with my familiar as she gets up and she kind of gets about her day too, how she views the world. Well, her view of the world is a perspective based on this is all so wonderful. Her world, everything is wonderful. It's right where it should be. Life is good. This is a great time to be alive. That's her perspective. Even if it's raining outside or on the, of course, long gone ago now, but even if it was snowing, the idea is that her mind is set. Her emotional filters behind her eyes or behind her ears or, behind the nose, the mouth, even the feeling of touch. All of this is affected by the emotional filters that we're setting. This is the experience that Othin sought. This is the understanding that Othin sought at the base of Yggdrasil, the center tree of the realm. He looked for other people's experiences. For those of you not familiar with the legends of Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil is the center tree of all the realms, and on all of the branches of Yggdrasil are existences, our lives, in the form of leaves. And those leaves have a center stem, which is our energy strike here in the middle. And that energy comes out our crown into our stem, which then leads back all the way back to the trunk, where trunk, it goes all the way down to the well that reside at each of its roots. And as it draws water from the well, it deposits these experiences, the reflection of these experiences on the well's water. Then, of course, in the legends, Othin, or Wuthin, would then go and trade one of his eyes that he may drink from this well. And what he was drinking was the experiences of all the life throughout all the realms, because it was all filtered back through Yggdrasil into this well. Of course, in the legends, as I've been told, after drinking from the well, Othin would sleep for 9 days and 9 nights, where he was processing all of these experiences with what he already had for knowledge and intellect within his mind, creating now these interrelationships, interlacing all of that with an emotional state, how he viewed things, how he felt about things, and that all of that came together into forming his wisdom. Super important that we understand that our experiences, i.e., part of what gives us this thing called wisdom, those experiences are based on our emotional state. Whatever our emotion is guides us to first to be able to even recognize the state, be able to recognize the experience, see it in a certain way, right? Which then creates an emotional energy within us. Bioelectricity passing the signal from our physical sensory input down to our heart through this well of the self, releasing biochemistry or the hormones into our body, which then percolates around, comes up to the brain. Brain then receives this biochemistry, evaluates it, finds it on the recipe sheet, then assigns a manipulated version of that energy to the me gate, where we can decide, yes, it supports our narrative or it doesn't, or B, I want to change it, whatever the case. I want to be happy. I can change it at the me gate, which then processes it into our memories. Our memories are then our interpretation of a particular experience. Now, the good news is once it's in memories, now when we sleep tomorrow or tonight, maybe, we lay down our head and we find the consciousness slipping back from our physical sensory input back to our spiritual brain. Now that interpretation of that experience is then transported through the spiritual self out to Yggdrasil, right? So we make connection to all the other spirits who look at your experience as a different perspective of a particular event, right? So now we're seeing the entirety of the puddle from all different perspectives, right? Because you've provided your interpretation. Your interpretation is simply a different perspective that hadn't been considered, that hadn't been looked at yet. And you're doing that. You are that person. You are driving that. So, very important job we all have, right? We're actually educating the spiritual realm in our interpretation of an experience. Super important. Good job. Glad we're doing it. I'm glad you're doing it. I really am. Because understanding the thought processes and the emotional interactivity means that we have an opportunity to control that narrative. You can't control something you don't see and you don't understand, a step-by-step process. It's very hard to kind of wrap our mind around something when it's kind of black box to us. But when we begin to reveal the layers of our thought process and the emotional effect on that thought process, we can begin to manage it. And when we begin to manage it, we're going to increase our bandwidth, and we're going to be able to process everyday trauma. We're going to have the ability to have our cognitive space break down those traumas to then make it more manageable, right? So remember, the brain doesn't see the difference between imagination and our physical sensory input. It doesn't know the difference between those two. So every one of our experiences includes a little bit of imaginary energy that our brain is kind of putting in there and saying, oh, extrapolate this to the next level. So being able to understand and manage that process allows us to have better experiences, to understand, and to have a more sound wisdom as the outcome, right? So today's the day. Wooten has told us that we can have experiences, we can learn from these experiences, and we can change our trajectory the way we want to travel. This is a wonderful opportunity for each of us to choose the path that we want to travel on, not that which is influenced upon us. We are in the driver's seat. You are in the driver's seat. You can make the decisions as to how to go forward in your life, happiness or not. That's on you. All right, my friends, I very much appreciate you joining me here this morning on Wooten's Day as we gain experiences into this lifetime. I look forward to seeing you tonight, 6:30 Alaska time, as we use our Sporks Mall to kind of delve into some of your questions as you've asked, either via our website or particularly on our social media. You can ask questions. We'll make a show. If we do about your question, we'll send you a free t-shirt that you can wear and keep and use. And if nothing else, you get a free shirt out of the deal. So, and maybe a working answer for your questions. So check that out. You can visit my website at norsewhispers.com, and there you can scroll all the way to the bottom, look to the left. There you'll see a big orange button that says ask me a question. Ask me a question. Let's get a dialogue going and hopefully get you some answers that work for you. All right? Have a wonderful Wooten's Day. We will see you again tonight, 6:30 Alaska time, where we will talk about whatever the question of the week is. So look forward to seeing you then. Until then, my friends, love and light. Have a wonderful Wooten's Day.